Today and Across the Fence, we're celebrating the thousands of Vermonters who put food on our tables. We're at the annual conference of the Vermont Dairy Industry Association and the Vermont Feed Dealers and Manufacturers Association, which is being held at the Snowflake Mountain Resort in Stowe. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. This conference here in Stowe is bringing together dairy industry stakeholders from across the state and the region. To find out more, I'm joined by Dr. Julie Smith. Julie is a veterinarian and dairy specialist with UVM Extension, and she is the president of the Vermont Dairy Industry Association. Thanks so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
Now, what's the significance of this fall conference?
Well, for the last 10 or more, it's actually been more than 10 years, the Vermont Dairy Industry Association and the Vermont Feed Dealers have joined together for their annual conferences. And we bring together a variety of speakers on topics of interest to the industry, both the dairy industry and the feed industry. Mm-hmm. And our speakers range from producers to processors to folks who are in regulatory agencies. And we want to get a glimpse of what's going on, what's new, what are updates, what are issues that folks are facing. And so it's a great opportunity to join together and do that.
Okay, well, there are two nationally known speakers and agriculture advocates who are here. We're going to meet one of them in just a moment. Her name is Michele Payn-Knoper. And why did the Dairy Industry Association invite Michele to Vermont?
Well, again, this is a great example of how the two associations are working to address issues that are facing agriculture today. And one of the issues that we identified was that folks, both those who are producers in agriculture and those who work with them, all of the service providers, processors, and all the folks that support those who are in agriculture, need to be ready to stand up and talk about what they do. And Michele Payn-Knoper is very well known nationally as an agricultural advocate, so we're really pleased to have her on the program with us today.
Well, great. Well, as you noted, this annual conference is an opportunity to learn about current industry issues while also networking with others from all aspects of Vermont's dairy industry. The 2013 Vermont Dairy Farm of the Year will also be honored here, and as Julie mentioned, Michele Payn-Knoper is one of the keynote speakers, and we're fortunate Michele has some time to visit with us. It's great to have you on the program.
Well, thanks for having me.
Your company is called Cause Matters. Tell us a little bit about it and the goal of your work.
Really what the goal of my work is to try to provide a voice to the people who feed the world, as well as connect people with food interests. So really it's connecting people around the plates. I've been in business for about 12 years, and I work as a professional speaker primarily, as well as consulting with organizations and how to further the food conversation.
Mm-hmm. And what's the most rewarding aspect of your work?
The most rewarding aspect is unquestionably when I see farmers who feel like they can really connect with people who eat their food, and farmers who take the opportunity to speak out, whether it's in person through shaking a hand or whether it's on social media through Facebook, because I really believe that's at some of the root of our issues in agriculture, is that we have to do a more effective job in representing the 1.5% of the population that's on a farm.
Mm-hmm. Which is kind of hard because farmers are so busy. It's hard for them to do that kind of outreach.
It really is, and it's not only being busy, it's also the fact that farmers are very modest, independent, stubborn people. And I can say that because I'm one, and being a dairy girl myself, I think dairy people are particularly independent and stubborn. So you have the busyness factor, you have the modesty factor, but the reality is today that people are very interested in where their food comes from, and farmers desperately need to have a voice in the conversation, because unfortunately there's a lot of folks who don't know what's happening on the farm, who like to spread misinformation about what we do.
Mm-hmm. And so you've recently written a book that's called No More Food Fights. What made you decide to write a book?
I have. I actually just released this in February of this year, and what made me decide to write a book was really the need to have a more robust conversation around the food plate. It's a two-sided book. It actually flips. There's a farm side and there's a food side. The farm side offers 6.5 steps in how farmers and others in agriculture can engage in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And the food side then offers 6 senses for folks that are on the food side of the plate. It has 35 contributors, and so I was very pleased and honored to have folks that range from farmers, as you would expect, to dietitians, to medical doctors, to an Olympic athlete, and a wide variety of folks, including a chef that I interviewed and got some personal perspective on.
What are some of the things that the book talks about?
Well, on the farm side, as I mentioned, there's 6.5 steps, and it's really in how to engage in the conversation. Mm-hmm. So there's ways to be able to identify what people's hot buttons are. And what I always encourage people to do from the farm side is not to do the data dump. Don't throw up facts on people's shoes because they're not interested. Agriculture is an incredibly technical business. We're scientifically oriented. We're business-oriented, we're research-oriented. That does not bode well for somebody who's simply looking for food information. So what we need to take responsibility for on the farm side of the conversation is to do a better job of really understanding what your interests are. When you go to the grocery store, or when you prepare food for your family, what is it that you're looking for? And then likewise on the food side, what I talked about was the 5 senses plus a 6th sense called common sense, which I think we lack sometimes today, frankly, a whole lot, and really try to give people that firsthand perspective and some food for thought about how food is grown today and what the firsthand look is on that. And I shared a great deal of personal stories of working with dairy cattle my entire life, but also tried to bring perspective for people all across the country and Canada as well. And what my litmus test is for people is to really get them to think about the basics when they go and select food. Food is not religion, it's not politics, it shouldn't be treated as such, but unfortunately it's become so contentious that people are almost afraid to talk about it.
Well, people have no idea, most people have no idea what it takes to be a farmer and what goes into the planning process in every step of the way.
Exactly, and farming is complicated, but you know what? I think that we in agriculture have to take responsibility that we have not done a good enough job in speaking out to the 98.5% of the population that's not on a farm. Yes, we're busy. Yes, we don't necessarily like to do that, not because we don't like people, but just because of the way that our culture is in agriculture. The time has come, especially here in Vermont. It's well beyond the time. And I would really encourage people to consider the fact that it's not just a local discussion, it's not just an organic discussion. It doesn't have to be conventional versus organic. It doesn't have to be about animal welfare. Sometimes it's just, how did you grow that? And where does it go after it leaves the farm before it hits my plate?
Right.
I was just ranting on Facebook this morning about how uncivil we have become in our society, and I really feel that very strongly, not only from a food side, but from a number of political issues too. I would really encourage people that if you have any question about how your food is grown, find a farmer, not just at the farmer's market, not just CSA, but find a modern farmer as well. Go the whole spectrum and just ask your question, because farmers will be more than happy to share what they do, but many times they feel attacked in this conversation. So if you approach them from a positive perspective, and that's one thing I listed in this book was actually some swear words that farmers probably will react negatively to. Of course, not that they're swear words, but factory farms and CAFOs and animal rights activists and all those sorts of things. The accusations that fly are really difficult for us to handle.
Right. As a matter of fact, a growing trend here in Vermont is for restaurants to have dinners where they have the farmers come and talk about the food that the people are going to eat, and that's been very popular.
Yes, yep, those are very neat initiatives to do that, and if people really want to understand what some of the issues are, or some of the facts are around major issues, I would encourage them to go a step further and actually go out to the farm. And again, if you have time, visit a wide variety of farms.
Now, you've also started something called Ag Chat. What is that?
I have. Ag Chat and Food Chat is actually a weekly conversation on Twitter. Started back 5 years ago. It's hard to believe. So it was one of the early chats, and it has involved thousands of people from, I think, about 18 countries. Really what the goal was to get agriculture working together and having conversations about what we need to work on. Agriculture isn't real great at working together sometimes because, again, you have that whole independence issue, and different people are concerned about different issues. So I really wanted to drive the conversation and see what people were interested in. I had no idea what it was going to turn into. Ag Chat actually became a foundation, or was one of the founding principles of the Ag Chat Foundation, which is a not-for-profit that reaches out to empower and engage farmers in social media. So it's been wonderful to watch the movement grow, and I won't take any credit for it. It's really the community that has driven the success of it, and it's helped agriculture reach well beyond the choir.
And can you give maybe a couple of tips for agriculture using social media networks?
Sure. The number one thing is to realize what you do is a novelty. People don't know what it's like to drive a combine down the road. They don't know what it's like to deal with a down cow. And I know some of those issues are really tough to talk about, but I can tell you from writing my book, the last story that I put in my book was how I dealt with one of my down cows. Because obviously I know that folks like the Humane Society of the United States are watching some of the things that I do, so I'm a little cautious, as most farmers are.
Right.
But if we can be truly authentic and transparent, whether we're in social media or in person, and we can give people a glimpse of what it's like to be on a farm today, and we have to realize in agriculture, it's not always a pretty business.
Right.
It's pouring down rain today. There's cows standing in mud.
Right, exactly.
And that's reality.
Now, you don't have to use social media to promote agriculture. What are some of the strategies that people can use to engage others through conversation?
Great question. I would say that some of the strategies would be to actually turn the plate, if you will, and ask questions. Go to the grocery store and ask people, why are you making that food choice? Or perhaps just to reach out a hand at church and start talking about what you're doing on the farm today. We unfortunately don't necessarily always share openly what we do, not because we're trying to hide anything, but just because we don't think people are interested. And food is so incredibly high, particularly sitting here in Vermont. We need to do a better job in everyday conversation, just saying, hey, this is what's happening on the farm today. Put a picture up. If you're really brave, put a video up. You know, some of those sorts of things. So there's a lot of different ways that you can try to be engaged in the conversation at a different level.
Now, you're also a certified professional speaker, and you present keynotes and workshops all over the country. How did you get started with that part of your business?
I actually started back in 2001. I had worked for the National FFA Foundation and had managed 15 different states, corporate relationships. And regardless of whether I was in a small agribusiness or a large agribusiness, I continued to see the misinformation that was being spread about agriculture. When I was at Michigan State, unfortunately, there were some rather radical activist groups that also tried to blow up and burn down buildings and whatnot, and that leaves an impression. So I would say the combination of those two things, along with losing my family farm in Michigan, left a pretty solid impact that we had to take responsibility to stand up and speak out. And so because of the fact that I had participated in public speaking in FFA, I actually fell in love with speaking when I was wearing that blue and gold jacket and decided to take the plunge, and I'm very grateful that I get to serve a cause that I believe in and do something that I'm so passionate about, because the people I work with are the most wonderful people in the world.
So what do you find most rewarding about engaging in all the different groups that you talk to?
What I find the most rewarding is when I see somebody sit up and say, you know what, she's right. I have to have the conversation, because it is ultimately about personal responsibility, and we're going to talk about that today. Whether you're a food buyer and you're seeking information about your food, rather than reading the USA Today and necessarily believing everything that's in there, take responsibility upon your own shoulders. If you're a dairy producer in Vermont and you're frustrated because of the claims that are being made about hormones, antibiotics, raw milk versus regular, so forth and so on, then take the responsibility to have the conversation. And when I see the light go on and people take that chance and reach out their hand to the other side of the plate, mission accomplished, and I can retire.
It doesn't mean that they have to go out and speak in front of a big group.
Absolutely. There are many different ways to tell agriculture's story, and to me it's about changing the reference point. If we can just offer people a glimpse from our side of the food plate, and likewise if we can learn a glimpse from the other side of the food plate, whether it's a dietitian or whether it's a food buyer, if we can change those reference points, then we have a much greater chance of being able to reach across and shake hands.
And so what are some of the biggest challenges of your work?
The biggest challenges of my work would unquestionably be the lack of civility in this discussion. I've said before, and I'll say it again, food is not religion, it's not politics, it's a basic necessity. We all eat at least 3 times a day. Some of us eat a whole lot more than 3 times a day. And so the lack of civility and the confrontation that seems to have enraged our society over the last few years is very disturbing to me. I do have some pretty significant concerns about activists, as most farms do, and about the pictures that they like to try to paint. To me, that is a complete disservice to where our food comes from, and I feel very strongly that Americans need to wake up and realize that the sensationalism that's happening, whether it's about farms or whether it's about other issues, is not what this country is about.
It's a lot of personal responsibility for people.
It really is, and I think that we will have to see a shift in some of the things that we're doing in our culture, and agriculture has to be a part of that. You know, I continue to say 1.5% of the population. It's really tough, that kind of minority. The great news is that people are very interested in food. They're very excited about a lot of the things that farmers are doing, and my hope is that someday people will wake up and realize that it takes a wide variety of people, or excuse me, a wide variety of farms to provide choices for people. You may choose to shop in the organic section, and that's your choice.
Right.
I may choose to milk cows in a traditional way that's not organic, and that's my choice.
Right.
One choice should not supersede the other. And if we can simply get people to the point of respecting the choices that are made on the plate and on the farm, we'll be okay.
Michele, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Well, that's our program for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.
Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension and WCAX-TV.